but they did extend Nick Richards for 3 more seasons after this one, obviously, for a total of $15 million. So on average, $5 million per season. I think the timing of this was interesting because he was going to be a unrestricted free agent this offseason, and Charlotte decided, hey, we're not going to compete with other teams. We're going to lock him up. And obviously Nick Richards too, like he did not want to necessarily test the market. Maybe he thought 15 million was good value for him. And I think from my perspective, 15 million is very reasonable for the type of player that he is. But I thought what was interesting for Charlotte's perspective in terms of the timing, they didn't wait obviously for free agency to do this. And then maybe they just wanted to make sure that they did secure his services. But what happens if the lottery comes about and Charlotte lucks into the first overall pick? And I know that, Wembanyama is a completely different type of player than Nick Richards, but now you have Nick Richards on a roster where he is now probably slated to be the third center. But you could have the same conversation starting this season where most people probably thought Mark Williams was going to overtake Richards at an earlier point, but he did not. So I think the story is great. I think it's awesome to have a second round pick become a second contract player here in Charlotte. I can't remember what pick he was over, like in the 40s somewhere. But yeah, that's kind of my initial gut instinct. I thought the timing was interesting. I thought Charlotte not waiting to the lottery, again, maybe make an adjustment. But again, if you get Wemby on this roster, having a third center on this team making $5 million is not really going to make that much of a difference anyway.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, he was the 42nd pick in 2020. And that was Mitch Kupchak traded back into the second round to draft Nick Richards. So Charlotte saw something in him, and it took a little bit of time, but it paid off. And he's the guy that clearly, from the jump, because they took Vernon Carey Jr. in the second round that year as well, a center out of Duke. Carey's the guy that I actually liked more as a prospect, and still think he has a chance to eventually kind of have a similar sort of jump. Remember, he is a little younger than Richards as well. But, very early on, Richards established himself as being higher in the organizational hierarchy than Vernon Carey Jr. And that, and then obviously, as the roster changed over, Vernon Carey Jr. is shipped out in the Montrezl Harrell deal late last season. And then, the opportunity was there for Nick Richards, with Mark Williams not being quite ready to go, I suppose, at the start of the season with a veteran coach. And the word out of training camp was that Richards was playing really, really well. And that wasn't just noise. He came out of the gate playing great basketball and was probably one of the better stories around the team the first third of the season. As things were starting to unravel before they had completely come untethered. And it's the second time in his career he's made a really big jump in terms of player development. He had something happen during his time at Kentucky, where before his junior year, he all of a sudden emerged as a big time. When he went from being a rotation player in the SEC to being one of the best big guys in college basketball, one of the best true centers in college basketball, and a star for that Kentucky team along with Tyrese Maxey. So anyways, as far as Richards goes, just a huge congratulations to him. This is life-changing money. $15 million over 3 years is a lot of cash, but it's also what seems to be a very reasonable contract for the team to get a solid, B plus backup center who's young, who's improving, that can also spot start for you, is a really, really nice piece to add. And Richards just offers this discrete set of skills here where that are valuable at the center position. He's not an explosive leaper, but certainly he's a guy that can play above the rim and catch a lob. He's a big time rebounder. He's a hard screen center, sometimes to his own detriment. Richie, I know you and I have talked about this, just the amount of offensive fouls, especially early in the season, that he was getting whistled for. And then, he had an interesting, probably about midway, 2/3 of the way through the season. It was interesting because he got hurt Plumlee was likely getting ready to get moved at the deadline. Mark Williams started taking on a bigger role, and there were no more minutes for Richards. And he hung in there. He rode that out. When Plumlee was dealt, he gets bumped back into the rotation. And then with Williams hurt, he's starting again and playing quite well for a defense that is playing. And I know sometimes you got to be a little. You got to sometimes take these post All-Star break, March, April NBA statistics with like a bit of a grain of salt, but like the Hornets are playing better defensively. Richards is helping them out there. Second straight season above 5% block rate. So he's giving you some rim protection. He's giving you some mobility guarding pick and roll, and certainly giving you some impact on the glass on both sides of the court. So yeah, I thought it was a nice deal for both player and for team. And Richie, even if they get Wembanyama, like these are obviously are very good problems to have, right? To have, too many good young players, even if it does create a bit of a positional logjam, because this salary with Richard strikes me as one that would be very easy to move for a guy that would be able to, you could copy and paste onto a lot of teams as a backup five or a sort of like spot starter rotation player. But just, you got to give Lee on this podcast credit, because Lee was always, I think, a step or two higher on Richards than you and I were, Richie and Spencer. I don't think,
I had no thoughts on Richards coming out of Kentucky, but yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, like coming into this past season
after
two NBA seasons and summer league and G League play, like all this, we had more information on him by that point, and I didn't think he was a sub NBA player or anything like that. I just thought he was backup centered. I thought he was like centered, sort of deep depth. Like your third center, the fifth or sixth big guy on a roster. And a player like that is someone that's going to bounce around a lot. That's going to maybe be in and out of the league at times. And instead, for him to jump up to this, to become a guy that can be or like a backup five, that means you're a rotation player. That means you're in an 8, 9, 10-man rotation. That means you have a little bit more stability. That means you have a little bit more league-wide value. And so it's a huge testament to Richards, to the coaching staff, to whomever helped push him on this development. And look, if they don't get the number one pick in Victor Wembanyama, who, by the way, is someone who has said he wants to play for in the NBA. I mean, we'll see how that shakes out. Again, we'll see how that shakes out. But maybe you could actually have some ecosystem with all of these giants on the same roster. But if they don't get Wembanyama, in the center rotation is Williams and Richards going forward, I think that is that's nice. Like, I think that's a really nice center pairing to have, with LaMelo Ball into the future.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a second here, but like, yes, Lee has been the highest on Nick Richards, but I've always seen the value in what he could bring. And I'm like you, I thought that he would be a guy that would just be further down the bench, and to see his role change coming in as a rookie and playing minimal minutes. And then last year he had some spot starts here and there, and he started to pick up his minutes, and now he's playing, I think, close to 20 minutes per game. And you're right, the skills that he does bring, it's very consistent on an every night basis. He's a screen setter. He's a very good pick and roll big. He gives LaMelo or whatever point guard he is playing with a radius to catch the ball. Obviously, he's not necessarily the lob threat. He can get, alley-oops here and there. He is amazing on the offensive glass. He is a guy that can also finish through contact very, very well. I put out something on Twitter the other day where he had a team high in offensive rebounding percentage. He also had a team high in shooting foul draw rate at 25.5. And then he's third on the team with and ones as well. So just finishing through that contact. And defensively, you mentioned it, he's also a rim protector on the back end. He can intimidate players as they get closer to the rim. And so when I think about him and Mark Williams, I also put this out on Twitter the other day. Again, I almost feel like if Richards never got injured, I'm not sure how many minutes Mark Richards would have played this year in terms of kind of ramping that up. But in terms of their play style, I feel like they have a lot of similarities. And I don't know if the redundancy is a bad thing or a good thing. I think having continuity within the roster is pretty cool, but I think having a change of pace, from going from Mark Williams to Nick Richards, if Wemby obviously we don't luck into him. What do you think about that in terms of just having a similar role and a similar play style with those centers? I think maybe if you have it with a wing, it's a little bit different because they're more interchangeable. But with Richards and Mark Williams, you know what you're getting with both of them, and it's very, very similar.
Yeah, I think it depends on almost which side of the floor you're talking about, which is why it's an interesting hypothetical. I think first off, I think it is situation. I think both of these things are like situational, and context is important, obviously. So like, sort of putting that stuff to the side, having two centers that you can guard, pick and roll the same way, right? That you can drop with both of those guys is going to be your base defense. But you can also, because of their mobility and length, you can do some stuff like you can, obviously with Williams, you can switch out some, you can bring him up to the level. But just, I think it's nice having two guys that your base defense can be the same at that anchoring center position. So that's where I think it's like a real asset. And again, because Williams offers some scheme versatility, defenses aren't just seeing the exact same team every time, same coverage every single time down the court. But again, you can be consistent over 48 minutes with your center rotation in terms of like, again, what your base defense is. Offensively, it's like you'd like to have one of those guys that could stretch a little bit. I think just looking at the way the NBA is set up now, it's really nice if at least one of your two centers can give you some pick and pop, some floor spacing, just given some other constraints of the roster and some things you may want to do against second units and close games out and blah, blah, blah. Assuming PJ Washington is a part of the picture going forward, I think he helps smooth some of that a little bit because, your main power forward is going to be a guy that can shoot, right? And is like a versatile 3-point shooter from all regions of the beyond the arc, and can shoot off movement, can shoot off pick and pops. And because he can play some small ball center for you, like situationally, you can still get to some 5-out looks. So I think it has the ability to be a strength for you defensively. Offensively, I think I'd like maybe a little bit more variety, but the fact that where they overlap skill set wise is offensive rebounds and screen and dive. I think that's like a nice area to have some overlap because both guys, you're going to have a pressure point on the rim in the pick and roll game, no matter who's playing center for